how to collect and use feedback on a presentation. I am a professional speaker. I get to travel all around the world remotely and in person when there are travel restrictions, and speak professionally to groups of 8 to 8,000. And so because of that, I have also become a professional feedback requester, or a professional feedback gatherer, because the best way that I can improve and constantly get better is through feedback. And so in this video, I am going to share 3 really simple, clever ways to collect feedback on your own presentations. I'm Chad Littlefield. Let's get into it. One of the reasons that I was inspired to make this video is, one, somebody asked the question of how can I collect feedback better and use it to get better? The use it to get better part is probably the more useful part of the question to consider. But one of the things that inspired me in the moment to actually record this is when I was getting feedback at the end of a workshop that was actually focused on the art of remote connection and remote presentation. A really crazy, spontaneous, magical moment happened in the Q&A where I was actually collecting some feedback. So I'll share the scenario and I'll actually play that clip of the connection. I think you'll really enjoy it. It will give you at least 50% of the joy that it gave me, and it gave me a lot of joy in the moment. Method number 1, ask people. Duh. You already know that to get feedback, you have to ask people. But what I want to add to this is a very important lens. Because when you ask everyone, you will get all types of feedback. And that, ironically, isn't actually super useful. And here's an example of that. So when I created this deck of We Connect cards, simple deck. They've got questions, simple but powerful deck. They got questions on one side, actions on another. There are a whole bunch of ways to use them in groups with exercises that help make connection and engagement really easy. Here's the thing though, when I created that deck and sent thousands of them all around the world, I got a lot of feedback, all right? I got people from I got a pastor from a church saying, why aren't there any questions about God? I had somebody who's a huge disability advocate wondering why I don't have any of the stick figures, why any of the stick figures aren't in wheelchairs on the back of the cards. I got a rabbi asking me to make a Jewish version, and on and on and on and on and on. And here's the thing, I actually value all feedback, but I don't implement and use all feedback, because if I did, this deck would have a whole bunch of crazy features off the side that wouldn't make it as useful as it is. It wouldn't make it as simple and practical for so many leaders and educators. So the invitation I want to offer is ask people, but when they send their feedback, catch it right here and look at it and make sure that it fits, make sure it's something you want to implement, and then choose what you adopt to implement. Because ultimately, it's you presenting, right? If someone's giving you feedback that would change fundamentally who you are, don't take that feedback, right? Because the best presenters are 100% themselves and authentic in the moment. And so if you tend to be a really hyped up presenter, then you're a hyped up presenter. If you tend to be a really flat presenter, then you tend to be a flat presenter. And you will learn things from people's feedback without losing yourself, how to adapt to that person's particular style of learning, etc. The second method is through an activity. So if you want to collect feedback from other people, I would actually turn it into a closing exercise for your presentation. So one example I often do is one of my favorite exercises I learned from a facilitator named Nate Folan called Group Anthem, where basically you invite the group to make a series of closing statements that begin with one of 3 phrases, either I am, I believe, or I will. That's a really cool way to collect feedback, because if you're inviting the group, hey, based on the last 60 minutes or based on this presentation, we'd love for you to make a closing statement. Has to begin with I am, I believe, or I will. It could be about something that you learned, something that you took away, something that you're still wrestling with, something that you're a skeptic about, something that made you angry, right? Whatever it is, it's just got to begin with one of those 3 phrases. And when you do that, you get a lot cleaner feedback, right? People begin their sentences and speak clearly, because feedback is a 4-letter word for a lot of people, and so giving it is uncomfortable. This makes it really comfortable because it, or I should say it makes it more comfortable because it gives people the first 2 words that their feedback starts with. It's the psychology of like a foot in the door. When you take one step, you're infinitely more likely to take a second and a third. And so just getting people started in that feedback. So that leads me to an adapted version of this, which is sentence completions. So another activity that you can do is create a sentence and ask people to just fill in the blank. So it could be, if I was leading this workshop, one thing that I would have emphasized is blank. And what you get there is what people's main takeaways are, what they cared about most, what was most valuable to them. And that is great feedback for your next presentation to focus and emphasize on those components. So somebody might give you the feedback of, hey, you shared 58 minutes of statistics, but the thing that was most compelling was the one story you told about Cassandra, right? Emphasize the story. Super useful, because now you can take that time of your presentation and the story can become front and center, and the stats and data that you're sharing can support that story. Third, sometimes people don't like sharing verbally in an activity and you want to collect feedback from everyone, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable for people to share. And so my favorite way of collecting feedback there is with Typeform. So or Typeform, SurveyMonkey, whatever you want to use. Typeform happens to be a client of mine. I love their tool. It's way more beautiful and conversational feeling. But what I do, you can upload videos to Typeform. And so I'll upload a video and I'll say, hey, I'm looking to make this talk better, or I want to make this presentation better. Can you watch any portion of it and just give some feedback below? Anonymous, you just leave one box for people to type feedback. They hit submit. It takes less than a minute or 2 for them to do, or depending on the length of your presentation, maybe a few minutes you're asking people. But it's great to create that written flow of feedback as well. As promised, I'm gonna cue up this clip. This happened with Remy at the end of a live workshop, where one of the magical things about asking for feedback live, which is typically pretty vulnerable for people, when you give an open floor for people to share and say whatever they would like, you get some really amazing feedback and sometimes very surprising feedback. So just as a little spice to your day, check out this moment where I realized this crazy connection was made at the end of this workshop. Is this, I guess I'm assuming because of your presence that this is still useful for you. I actually want to do a gauge though, because if you want this to turn a different direction and you don't want Chad or Will to like get up on a pedestal, and we want to have more of a conversation, can we just, is this working for you right now? Is this time serving you well? On a scale of yes to, I've got some way that I want to change it up a little bit? Okay, I'm seeing mostly yeses, and I'm recognizing that my word count is getting a little bit high, and so I'm gonna try to reduce that word count a little bit, even though I really like being in this space with you all. Remy, I think you're off mute. Do you have something you want to jump into?
Well, actually, I met you and I know your mom in Milton, and I was wondering if you remembered me.
Oh my gosh, wait. At the Apple store?
Yes.
What in the world? Wait, Remy, how did you end up here in this moment?
I've been following you, and this was a thing. I said, oh, well, I'm going to see what Chad's up to, and I can benefit because everybody's Zooming now. So I figured I'm always willing to learn, and what you said is very interesting. So, and Will, not counting you out, Will.
But you met me and my mom. God, isn't that so awesome? Did you see, I don't know if you need to rewind to see this, but did you see my face when I realized, oh my gosh, I met you at the Apple store, Remy, right? It's like this total shock. That feedback is really, really helpful to get on presentations. And my final tip, my final invitation is be mindful of who you get feedback from. Don't go to your harshest critics and the biggest curmudgeons on the planet for feedback, because guess what? Even before they saw your presentation, or even before you asked them for feedback, they were already cranky. And public speaking and presenting is most people's #1 fear. You don't need to pile on unnecessary negative feedback that's mixed up with somebody else's baggage and crap. And so sometimes, not always, I think critical and constructive feedback can be very, very, very valuable. And sometimes I ask for positive feedback. And so somebody, for example, I'll give a keynote. Somebody will come up to me at the end and say, oh, that was so awesome. I really loved it, blah, blah, blah. They just want to come up and talk. And I love that. And when they say, oh, this was so awesome and I really loved it, I don't ask them, hey, can you tell me what's one thing I can improve? I ask them, oh, what did you really love about it? And then they speak to this thing that really blew their mind or that they really struck them or whatever else. And that is just as important as taking constructive feedback to grow and be better, is the feedback that gives you the self-confidence to present again and again and again with a little bit more confidence. I'm Chad Littlefield. I loved meeting you here. I'd love to meet you on the channel. I post regular videos. I've created this connection toolkit and a whole bunch of resources. Feel free to check out what I stand for in the description. Have an awesome day.